services and programs for non-native English speakers in the St. Louis region, and how they've adjusted during the pandemic. Next on City Corner. Hi, I'm Sarah Thompson, and welcome to City Corner. We're all living through the pandemic, but how does that experience change when you live in the St. Louis region as a non-native English speaker and you experience language barriers, especially when it comes to critical COVID-19 information that can protect individuals and families? For this City Corner, I'm speaking with a St. Louis-based business as well as a nonprofit organization which have both adjusted or grown their services to accommodate the changing needs during the pandemic. I'm now joined by Susanne Evens. She is the CEO and founder of AAA Translation, which you're seeing right there on your screen. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm going to really just dive in. I want to learn so much more about AAA Translation, but we're focusing the show a little bit, or starting off, about how things have been affected by the pandemic, and especially for people who are non-native English speakers. And so we're going to get into all the good stuff about your business, which you've had for the past 20 years. But tell me just in an overview about how things have changed for you since the pandemic started and how it's affected the services that you provide.
Yes. So I saw early on, I saw a need that for translations for our immigrant population. And I jumped in there with a few local organizations who I saw needed complimentary free translations. I'm like, hey, we're happy to help. And it just, snowballed, and we started helping some other services like the Metro West Fire District, STL Juntos, that's how it all started, the St. Charles County Department of Public Health, and then a few others that asked, can you help us? I mean, these are organizations that don't have funding for translations. And it's very important for me as a translator, for people to receive information in their native language so they can act accordingly.
Well, I mean, during the pandemic, obviously you want to make sure there's multilingual information available because it's pretty critical. You just named some of your projects, and I know that some of that was pro bono work that you donated as well. Can you talk about some of the specifics so people can understand when we're talking about why it's so critical to have information, especially during the pandemic, translated, what that might mean? Is it for pamphlets? Is it for videos? Is it healthcare related? Can you get into some of those details?
Yeah. We helped with, just basically, how do you wash your hands? If you don't understand that, and wear your mask and social distancing, if you're a non-English speaker and you don't know that, you cannot act accordingly. So we translated guidelines, rules and guidelines, where to go, where to seek help, all this information that's so imperative and normal for us English speakers, that non-English speakers don't know where to go and where to seek help. And, this was all distributed via social media. There were pamphlets handed out and so forth and so on.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the word social distancing. I know what we're hearing even in English are new phrases, new terminology. So we've got social distancing. We've got, unprecedented times. We hear that over and over again. And even medical terms that are used all the time by people in healthcare. But when we talk about contact tracing or, high risk symptoms versus low risk symptoms. And so I was wondering about some of the projects and clients that you've worked with. Are there sort of challenges in conveying in such a succinct way those terms and phraseology? It's important clearly, but are there challenges in getting that across in the most efficient way?
Well, yeah. So a lot of our clients have employees worldwide, international employees, and employees in the United States that are some of them are non-English speakers, or do not understand English very well. So our clients are actually very proactive in translating all the COVID-related information for their employees locally and worldwide. I mean, the first 3 months of this pandemic, we were on standby for major corporations. We were working 7 days a week, cranking out translations just to make sure that everybody understood what was going on in the United States and what was going on outside of the United States within their companies.
That's really, I mean, really impressive. In 10 languages, I really do want to get into, which we will very shortly, everything that your company does. When we focus on the COVID-19, the pandemic, I mean, what is the risk? This is going to seem like an obvious question with an obvious answer, but what do you feel in this field is the risk if we are not getting out critical information, healthcare information in different languages?
Death. I mean, if you really want to go straight down to it, if you don't provide translations, if people do not know what they need to do in a certain moment, it could lead to death. And we've seen it. I mean, we've been involved in some legal cases where, incorrect translations have, terrible results.
So let's then now, this is a great way to segue into your business. I mean, you've been doing this for, you're a linguist, doing this for a long time, your business for 20 years. I mean, overall, I mean, the world that we live in, globalization, where we are right now in 2020, how important is it, regardless of if we're in a pandemic or not, to have sort of multilingual translation for businesses, for organizations?
Well, if you think about it, 76% of the global population do not speak English. So right there, if you work in the global marketplace, you should have, your website translated, your product info, your guidelines, everything that you need to sell in the global marketplace. And we do a lot of operating instructions for manufacturing. A lot of countries have laws that they have to have operating manuals in their native language before they can even be imported into the country. I remember one case during the Olympics in China. One client had sent machinery over to China and it was stuck in customs because they did not have the appropriate manual with it. It cost them a lot of money to have this sitting in customs and waiting for the translation. I mean, every day these machines sit in customs, they charge you for it. So yeah, I mean, it's very important to think, not only on the translation part, but also the cultural part that goes with it, because translation is not just word for word. It's actually, taking a whole culture into consideration when translating something into a foreign language.
Let's talk about that, because when I was looking at your list of services, I mean, there's interpretation, there's global consulting, communication needs, obviously translation, but cultural awareness is one that's listed. And I think that's very important because it's something, culture understanding is something that we as a society often lack, but it's so important. It's not just about language. Talk about the role of cultural awareness and the work that you do.
Yeah, it's for example, with websites, great example. When we receive an inquiry, I look at the website. I'm right away pointing out, there are some sentences we cannot use. We need to rewrite that because Americans write a lot with an American football or baseball mentality, for example, where in other countries, football and baseball, it's just now starting to get bigger, but just basic, when you create a website for a foreign clientele, you have to have basic language, explain what you're doing, explain what you're selling, and just give the main point. So what we tell the client, okay, we can cut this way down for foreign clientele. You don't need to translate everything. Colors are super important with foreign clientele. Some colors mean different things in different countries that you have to stay away from. One client, for example, 20 years ago when they went first global, they asked us, is our company name offensive in these 40 countries? So we did the research if the company name is offensive if in any way. So they had the foresight to even look at that, to even think about that, And then, even when you travel to the country, there are certain ways, to greet, to do certain things when you visit a client. I mean, there's so much more than just, okay, we want to do business with another country, but you really need to study the culture alongside the language.
That's such an important point. And that gets into your consulting services, because obviously people will come to you with, this is what we want to do. And it's not just the translation, but the full picture. Let's talk about that. I mean, so you've got clients that are local here in St. Louis, but a big chunk of your clients are also international. And tell me about some of your translators and what languages you cover, outside of what might seem like the obvious languages that are spoken frequently here in the United States, but it sounds like much more.
So we actually cover 300 languages. Yes. So the top 20 languages, the Chinese, the German, the Spanish, the French, Japanese, Russian, and then there are these languages that, sometimes we even get new language requests as like, oh, wow, where is this language from? So during COVID, actually, we translated for Missouri, we translated Hakka language, Amharic, French for Haiti, Swahili, Tigrinya, Pohnpeian, and Chuukese. And these are, immigrants that live here in the state of Missouri that received COVID info in those languages. So every day is different in our business here. I mean, every day there are new, exciting challenges, and we always learn, and we always pick up new languages along the way.
I was going to say, I mean, you've been doing this for your business for 20 years and you're a linguist. I mean, what do you see are some of those changes? It sounds like I think what you're saying is every day is new, every day poses new challenges, and you're asked to do something more. I mean, how would you summarize sort of the adjustments that you've made, not just really for this year with the pandemic, but overall, and where you see your business going? It sounds like you're going to have to continuously expand, huh?
Absolutely. Language instruction is huge. And what we have done a lot lately is HR, human resources policies, for all these global clients that have employees worldwide, because they make sure that they understand their HR policies in every country. That's a huge trend right now.
It's really fascinating. I mean, just as I was saying earlier, just even prepping for this show, it's something that seems now that I'm like reading all this material and reading everything on your website so apparent, but I think sometimes insulated in a city like St. Louis, we can sort of forget about it. I want to acknowledge that you're originally from Germany and you've been here for a long time. I mean, how is it running this international business outside, from right here within St. Louis? Do you feel any different contrast some days with what your life is like living here versus then logging onto your computer and dealing with 300 languages on a daily basis?
Well, the beautiful thing here is logging onto my computer. I have reached to 300 different translators and deal with a huge part of them almost every day. So I find out what's going on in China. I find out what's going on in South America. I find out what's going on in Canada, Germany, everywhere. I mean, I have contact with people every day, which is nice, which gives me my international kick that I like being in St. Louis. But I love it here. When I moved here, I saw an opportunity. That's why I started this business. Absolutely. And St. Louis has been really good to us.
No, I've enjoyed speaking to you today and learning more about your business, because it really is, it's incredibly important information. Communication is how we are able to understand each other and understand the world that's happening, that we live in, and what's going on around us. And so it's really, really vital what you're providing. We've got your website's got a lot of information. You do a lot too, even within the media. So if you want more information, you can head to AAAtranslation.com. We've got the full page graphic there for you on the screen. There's the telephone number for you to reach out to. There's also the toll-free number and an email, info@AAAtranslation.com. But if you want to understand more about all the services that Suzanne and her company provide, head to the website again, AAAtranslation.com. And Suzanne, I want to say something fancy and sign off in a different language, but I won't. But I want to thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so very much, and the work that you're doing during the pandemic, and just good luck with everything for the remainder of the year.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick break, but stay with us. We have more City Corner right after this. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm Sarah Thompson, and welcome back to City Corner. I now am joined by Julie Fox. She is the Executive Director of Immigrant Home English Learning Program. And Julie, thank you so much for joining me today. It was about 2 years ago that I interviewed you in studio at STL TV, and the organization then was called Immigrant and Refugee Women's Program. The name has been changed. Start things off. Why the name change?
Sure. Thank you for having me today. Yes, we changed the name after 25 years of being Immigrant and Refugee Women's Program because we wanted to make sure that the public knew exactly what we did. And that was so vague, who are we? And we also serve men as well. So, it was vague. Nobody knew what it was. And so we kind of just stepped back and looked and to see what would be a good descriptor of what we do every day so that there's not many questions, not as many questions like, are you a shelter? Are you do you just serve immigrant and refugee women? So that's kind of where we were going with that.
Okay, well, before, we're focusing really this show on here we are, we're all living through the pandemic, but especially what it's like when you're a non-native English speaker here in St. Louis, really across the country, but what it's like to go through the pandemic and having access to information and when you don't have access to multilingual information. So before we get into sort of how you have pivoted to sort of work with and accommodate your students during the pandemic, I do want to just let people know what it is that you actually do pre-pandemic even. So tell me a bit more about the organization.
So yes, our mission is to empower foreign-born adults by providing individualized in-home English language education and the tools to effectively navigate their new community, their new home. And so basically we have volunteers that we train to teach English. You don't have to have any experience, and we train you exactly how to do it through a set of books that we use and curriculum. And then we match them with a student in the area, and they go in twice a week for an hour to teach English and work on any goals that student may have. Sometimes student brings a bill or a note from a teacher or something like that to their meetings to talk about it and kind of figure out what's going on. So that's how we effectively give them some life skills that are pertinent to America culture.
And I was looking on the site, and I mean, in the last 25 years of the nonprofit of the organization, you've worked with 160 new U.S. citizens, 1,300 student serves, and you have more than 1,200 volunteer teachers. I mean, that's really, really remarkable. That's really great to show that people in St. Louis, how welcoming they want to be to people who don't speak English as a first language or who need to overcome those language barriers. Here we now move into 2020. You're continuing your work. You've already got your day-to-day of running the organization. The pandemic hit. Talk about what happens then internally when you say, how can we still do our mission, still do our program and services, but accommodating and working within the conditions that the pandemic has put upon us?
Yes, we had to shift quickly because our model is in home. So obviously that was not going to be happening anymore. And we had to put that out to our teachers and students, of letting them know that English classes were halted. At that time, we started a program adaptation committee to get together and work on what needed to be done to make adapt our program to the new COVID times, I guess we say. And so we came up with 3 options: online learning. So we have students who are participating with their teachers through Facebook sometimes. It's amazing what apps have. Facebook, WhatsApp, Zoom. They are working with their teachers on the material. They both have a book in front of them. Also, we have access to online materials as well. So we have about 167 students that are working that way. We also have independent learning, where they are given their books, they work on them, and they take pictures of them and send it to their teachers, and they have some kind of conversation about what they've been working on. And then we also understood that a lot was happening. Kids were home from school now, and they didn't have that time that they may have had previously to do any type of learning. So we allowed for students to suspend their learning without losing their place in the program.
It's amazing how quickly everyone has had to adjust, in this case that you did, while still being able to provide services. I think I want to, and obviously we can't interview a lot of your students individually for the time that we have on the show to ask them what their life has been like for these past several months. But I was wondering if you could share that with us, because I think it's really important that, and I was saying this in our first segment as well, is just the empathy and understanding that we're all going through this. We definitely are, but I think sometimes, especially in a city and in the greater region of St. Louis, we can forget what it might be like if English is not your first language. And so I was wondering if you could just share with us some of the experiences that your students have had, especially when it comes to understanding critical information, healthcare information, that is vital, that is life-saving during the pandemic, and what their experience has been.
So yes, language access has been one of the biggest needs in our immigrant and refugee community, foreign-born community at this moment, because we have the city and the county both have sets of rules and all this information that's coming from them, and that is not something that they have the access to quickly, and like we might we might be able to watch it on the news and understand what's happening, where they would see it and not have that information. So a lot of the times our teachers, our staff members, and anybody that's working with the foreign-born community are helping them get that information. Just, it's easy for us to pull it up online real quick, and it's not that easy for them to do that. So Google Translate's great. It gets better every day, but still just being able to know exactly what's happening in your community is very difficult.
And when we talk about the immigrant community, you were saying just what were some of your teachers getting sort of questions about? I know this is even for, English speakers, where we're using new terminology, social distancing, trace contacting, low risk symptoms, high risk symptoms, all these new sort of language and terminology that might have been used and still used in the healthcare profession a lot, but not necessarily for everyday people. Were you getting questions around that with students about, just what we now has become our day-to-day in terms of social distancing, things like that? But were there questions coming to you related to just how do I function on my day-to-day? Because I'm not quite sure, with a lot of misinformation and information being put out there.
Yes, we did at the very beginning of the pandemic, we did a check-in with all of our students, which is over 250 students at the time, and asked them, do you understand what COVID is? Do you need help understanding like social distancing and why we are all staying at home and all those type of things? And so, yeah, there were a lot that asked those questions about, well, what does this mean? Why aren't my kids going to school? How can I help my kids with school? All that good stuff. So it's lucky that there's a great immigrant community to service provider community to help do that work, because if not, then they, would only hear the national news and like you said, get all these different information is being thrown at us all the time. What is actually some trustworthy information? So I think we work really hard to make sure they have that trustworthy information and know that we're here to help them any way we can.
And how have the virtual classes been going because as you've pointed out, the population, the students that you serve are adults, and they're adults who are learning English. And so, how has it been? Obviously, when you're in person, there's just a level of communication between behavior, and even me using my hands right now, how we communicate with each other. But how has that been for your students and their virtual learning?
I think it's been interesting for each one of them. Some of them have taken very well to it and are really enjoying it. And I don't even know if they'll go back to in-person learning because it's just working so well. But yeah, some people you struggle with, Zoom, like we all struggle with Zoom on a regular basis, or, they struggle with the worksheets and being able to like communicate with their teacher, like, here's where I'm at. Are we all on the same page at this time? So, there's those struggles, but it's so amazing that they overcome them so quickly. Like right now, we're really focused on getting technology funding secured so that we can provide them with tablets or a laptop, or even if they need a mobile hotspot, so that way they can access the internet, access the materials without having to look at a small phone for an hour.
It's great to hear that, you're still able to do the work and that your team is still able to do the work. Before we wrap things up, I know since the last time I talked to you, you have now become chair of Immigrant Service Providers Network. And I wanted to learn more about that before we wrap things up, just because I know that that's, I believe, a difference from when the last time I spoke to you in studio.
Yes, that's a big difference. Pretty quickly. But what the Immigrant Service Provider Network is, a coalition of the immigrant service providers in the community. We get together to network and brainstorm ways to help the community. So it's a really great network of people. It has been, during these times of the pandemic, it has been working very hard with our county government, with our city government, on language access and how to make it better and for their constituents. And also we were able to do a fund. It was called the Immigrant Family Emergency Fund, where we were able to offer direct cash assistance to our foreign born in our community. So that was very, we all came together, the coalition came together and started working on that. And so now we're getting ready for a conference. It's a free virtual conference coming up September 16th, 17th, and 18th. So if you just go to ihelpstl.org, you can see that and register for that. It's called Immigrants in a Time, Serving Immigrants in a Time of Upheaval. So.
And couldn't think of a better name for what kind of is going on right now. I really appreciate your time. I think when we were talking about just this topic, it's we can get so insulated in our day-to-day lives and not think about how everyone is experiencing the pandemic differently. And we take for granted, I think, communication and language. And it's one thing when everyone is speaking the same language, but when you don't, you experience something very, very differently on top of what would naturally be happening. And so I am so appreciative of your time today to remind everyone about the work that you're doing and that you're still there and that the services are still provided, which is going to lead to our full page graphic. We've got it up there. It's Immigrant Home English Learning Program, a diverse and inclusive community where all immigrants are empowered through language. We've got the address there, but for more importantly, go to ihelpstl.org. And again, that's ihelpstl.org, what's on your screen, or you can email program@ihelpstl.org or call 314-771-1104. All right, Julie, it was great to see you. Sorry we're seeing each other virtually, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and all the best to you and your team, just everyone and your students, and just hang in there. We're going to get through this, and thank you again.
Thanks.
And thank you at home for watching City Corner, and keep it right here on STL TV, Experience St. Louis.